Hey, what's going on YouTube? Hope you've been enjoying all the Street Fighter 6 content on the channel, but it's finally time to get back to the stream and to review the Street Fighter 6 beta. I've been asked a lot about my overall thoughts on the game, and I'm going to use this video to go over pretty much everything I can in reviewing the content that was in the Street Fighter 6 beta and give my overall opinions on Street Fighter 6 and its current direction. And, I guess divulge, is it Street Fighter 5 2.0? I keep getting asked that question. I couldn't understand why. We'll go ahead and get on into it, starting with, of course, the menus and settings. Street Fighter 6, honestly, is the first AAA Street Fighter game ever. So one of the main things I really noticed when first opening up the beta was the first thing I did was go into all the menus and settings that was actually unlocked before the beta went live. You can see from this screen, there's tons of settings to customize everything. Just like the quality of product is instantly like through the roof. There's so many different ways to customize your controller inputs. Lots of interesting features to make things easy to save and to transport your settings. You have many different button presets. You can save up to 5 per controller type, including for player 1 and for player 2. You can copy those button presets, modify them on the fly. You can even edit things like negative edge, turn negative edge on and off, test your controller settings right in the menu. So just a really good quality of life feature for all of your controller settings and a lot more customization than we've ever seen for controllers. There's also interesting things like 3 button mapping. Like you can hold a button that modifies if it's going to be a 3 button or not. Like if you press punch or kick, it'll make it 3 buttons if you want to do that. That way you don't have to have 2 separate buttons to have a 3 kick, 3P button. Just really interesting and clever controller settings that are available to really customize your controlling experience. And I feel like we're going to see a lot more people do button remapping and do things of that nature to fit their own preferences, because there's a lot of settings to play with here. Graphic settings, like they have a lot of really in-depth graphic settings right off the bat. These were not present in Street Fighter 5. They don't really have these options available to you. So it really just shows that they're kind of making this an actual PC game, including the option to use your keyboard and mouse, alternate between your arcade stick controller and keyboard and mouse on the fly with no issues. So it just shows that it's actually working. They even have really detailed sound settings here. You can change the sound effects of any individual component of the game to fit your liking. So tons of customization, tons of options here, including a lot of accessibility options, which is really impressive when I look through these menus. They have tons of different sound cues that you can turn on or turn off as needed. So for people who are visually impaired or want to use these, you can use these to cue certain things like distance to opponent. You can actually get a sound cue that will let you know based on the pitch how close or far away you are from the opponent, if they cross you up or not. Just tons of really clever accessibility options to make Street Fighter 6 more accessible to those who might need these sorts of options available. So I was really impressed with all of that. So that was a big plus for the Street Fighter 6 beta. Just shows like the quality of product is really heading in the right direction. So I was super happy to see that. However, PC performance, it was mostly good, but I did have a few hiccups. So upon first booting up the beta and launching the game, I didn't update my graphics drivers, my graphics card drivers, and I do have a 3090 of a beefy PC rig. And you can see here with everybody in the battle hub spamming their effects, I even have like the resolution scaled down right now during this. My FPS is about 15, 13, and barely reaching 20 at any moment, right? So I was like, well, something's not right here. I did update my graphics card drivers, restart the game, and I was able to improve the performance in the lobby. But I would often get around like maybe 30 to 40 FPS in the battle hub. It also required me to tweak the graphic settings like I showed in the previous screen, right? So I would lower the number of visible battle hub participants, which really helped the performance. But it can get pretty hefty in the battle hub for sure. So that was definitely not the most optimized experience out of the gate with the battle hub. However, in game, the gameplay FPS was rock solid 60. I did have, I believe, one instance where the FPS was sort of dipping below 60, but once again, I believe after the restart and everything worked fine. So for the most part, I think with the proper settings and having your drivers up to date, performance should be good on PC. But I do feel like the battle hub could be a bit improved. Like I have pretty top of the line equipment, and even I was struggling to really push the battle hub to its max settings, which is a little disappointing, but I got it functional with the right settings. All right, so getting into some of the gameplay features, One big thing that is a very hot topic, of course, is the netcode, since Street Fighter V had such a rough history with delivering quality online play. Street Fighter 6, it doesn't disappoint, right? So right off the bat, you can even see in the in-game UI, one great change is they actually show you the number of delay frames, rollback frames, and ping. There's no mystery to what's happening with your connection. Like, they finally stopped using explicitly these bars. The bars are meant to like roughly estimate what your connection quality is like, but they just give you the numbers, right? Like, Street Fighter 6 in general stops trying to hide information from the player, which I felt like was a big issue in fighting games for a long time. They kept trying to obstruct or hide information like ping and all that, including things like frame data and stuff in training mode. Street Fighter 6 in general, the philosophy is just give people all the information they want. They can use it if they want or not. So the netcode was very, very good. I played people from Mexico, UK. Those were 3-bar connections according to the game, but I really did not notice an issue. One thing about the netcode that has been discussed is that the way it works is it increases the amount of delay frames based on your ping, and it does it in a tier-based system. So for every 100 ping, it raises the delay by another frame, is what I've heard, which is not like supposed to be the perfect implementation of rollback. You ideally would have a set delay that maybe you set, like I want to go up to this many delay frames, and then the rollback frames is what should fluctuate the most, while delay should stay standard. Because, for example, if it's this tier-based system, your input delay could vary while you're in the middle of a match, depending if your ping varies, right? If your ping goes above or below that certain tier, it'll modify your input delay as the ping fluctuates, which is not the most ideal situation. So there could be some issues with that people were reporting, but on the average experience, I basically had no problems except for maybe like beta related hiccups. There were some disconnects from the server here and there. Honestly, for a beta, the fact that it was functional as much as it was really impressive. It was mostly on day one where there were disconnects, and I don't think that's really the netcode. I think that's more them working out the kinks with the servers in the beta itself. Overall net play experience, very good. People were reporting matches playing from anywhere from like UK to middle of US. I heard people playing from East Coast of Japan. So it feels like we're finally entering the modern era with netcode experience, and Street Fighter V is no longer to be a shadow on Street Fighter 6 with its improper netcode implementation. Seems like we're actually going to be able to have reliable online play and have people have a good experience, even at maybe, you know, lower ranks, or people might be on Wi-Fi and things like that. I don't know of anyone who explicitly played on Wi-Fi. I mostly played against PC players, or exclusively, because I think crossplay was turned off for the beta. So we still have to see how that performs. But that said, hopefully it all works out in all the corner cases once we have more people playing the game. Crossplay was on. I didn't see anyone playing PlayStation. Maybe I played one or two then. I thought crossplay was off by default because I didn't see hardly anyone playing on PlayStation. See, look, this person has crossplay maybe. Correction, crossplay was on. I had it off apparently. But one other neat feature that I noticed is that if you do run into a connection hiccup, which was very rare, but when it does happen, an option pops up on the bottom left of the screen where you can pause to actually forfeit the match. So if both players select that option, the match is just pretty much canceled. So in cases where there's a true network interruption, the players can just end the match, like no contest, exit out of the match, which is actually a really, really good feature, because sometimes you just get a dud connection for some reason, and instead of being forced to play it out, you can just quit. So just tons of quality of life features even with the net play. And even though the beta was mostly focused on Battle Hub, which is not really like the ranked mode, Battle Hub is obviously supposed to be like the social aspect of the game. You could still do ranked. The matchmaking for ranked basically works just like Street Fighter V. You turn it on in a menu and you have the same similar type of settings for it. And there's actually, you know, similar ranks as well. That has kind of cleaned up the ranks in the leagues, where they have rookie, iron, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, master, and you have rank 1 through 5 within those leagues. And it was pretty interesting because what they did is they actually did a placement match system. So you can even see in these matches that I'm playing, I'm doing placement matches when I first queued up for ranked. You play 10 placement matches and then it decides what rank you're at. So based on how I played during my placement matches, I actually got put immediately at diamond. So it prevents people from starting new accounts and having to just slog through beating up on lower ranked players. I think the placement match system is super smart because like no one gains anything by having this mismatch experience going on in the beginning. So maybe during the placement match session with your first 10 matches, you might have mismatch opponents thrown your way. but once that's done, it was pretty accurate at placing you at an appropriate rank, and then you can just climb the rank system naturally through that. So I thought that was super sick. People often at lower ranks complain about smurfs and about, you know, people beating up on them at lower ranks, when oftentimes it's people who switch accounts who are playing through the low ranks and are stronger players and beating up on newer players. So this completely eliminates that, and I think that's a really smart system to do. One of the features I'm most excited about is training mode. Street Fighter 6 feels like the next generation in so many ways, the next generation of fighting games in so many ways, and I feel like training mode is one of the big ones. Now listen, I'm going to expose myself here. I'm mostly a Street Fighter player, Capcom fighting game player. I play mostly like the big releases of fighting games, right? I'm not going through every single indie fighting game out there, and I played Street Fighter, Marvel, Tekken, DBFZ, kind of the major releases. I haven't even dabbled with NRS that much. So obviously, I'm not going to have the most complete comparison of training mode, but I will say that of all the games I have played, Street Fighter 6 training mode is the most in-depth and most has the most features you could ask for of a training mode ever. I mean, ever. There might be some indie fighting game out there, Skullgirls or something else, them fighting hers, that has Street Fighter 6 beat, but Street Fighter 5 had a decent fighting game mode or training mode. Street Fighter 6 takes it to the next level and even has features that I never even considered in the past, which are very, very useful. So I have screens of all the different menu options, so I'll just go through it. You have your basic settings here. Nothing really new from Street Fighter 5. The dummy settings has a lot of really interesting options. So one of the biggest things from this that is like really freaking useful is the block count setting. So you can actually tell the dummy to block a specific number of buttons or moves before they do an action, or like stop blocking, depending on if you have a recording setting on to do an action after blocking or not, right? So it was really hard in Street Fighter 5 to test block strings. Say I want to test, I pressed a button 3 times in a row and then I do a follow-up. I want to see what happens if after they block 3 buttons and do something, what happens there. To test that in Street Fighter 5 is really awkward. You might have to even swap characters and record the dummy doing the offensive string, and then test yourself as the character you're trying to lab against, control them, and test different responses in return. It was a weird like reversal of options there. But this game lets you just set the block count. I mean, I think you can go up to 30 or higher on the block count. So you can test really long block strings and just figure out exactly what you want to do and test different strings on the fly. So this is a really amazing change, which makes testing string pressure so much easier in Street Fighter 6. So that was a really big one. You also have all the different drive reversal options, throw escape options, recovery options, has everything you need there. All the different states you want to set up, punish counter, counter hits. Those are all easily available to set in the counter. So lots of amazing settings here to test with. So you can see here, you can turn on no block as well in the dummy settings. You also have environment settings. I didn't mess with this much, but you can change the game speed and input delay settings if you want to test, I guess, net play scenarios, or if you're on PC and preparing to go to offline Street Fighter 6 tournaments and they're going to be laggy, who knows? But you do have that option here in training mode as well. It does have this different starting positions. I will say that this is not really even necessary because one of the great shortcuts in the game that you can set, which you can also custom map, you can quickly restart at any position on the screen by holding left, neutral, or right. And also, if you hold it while doing down, you'll swap sides. So if you hold down right, you'll be on the right side. If you hold right alone, you'll be on the left side on the right side of the screen, right? So you can quickly swap to any position on the screen, left, middle, or right, and also choose the side you are with your opponent on the screen instantly, just with your controller. So you don't have to even go into this menu. There's shortcuts to do that. So that is really good for quickly moving around the screen. You have all your basic meter settings like in Street Fighter 5. Nothing too much to report here, but all the meters are here to customize. Recording settings. So this one is really cool. They have tons of recording options available. They tell you exactly how long you recorded for. You can also tweak like the reversal settings. You can have many different reversal settings already mapped and set up, and then you can set custom delays in each one of them, turn them on and off on the fly. So you can have all your reversal settings set here. You select the move and it brings up a menu of all their moves, and you can choose which one you want to do. They also have different reversal options. So Wake Up Reversal and On Block Reversal are the two common ones from Street Fighter V, but they have On Damage Reversal, meaning you can test resets. It was so hard to test resets in Street Fighter V because there was no way to get them to do something after they were hit by a move that didn't exist in the training mode options. But obviously, it's a common situation in the lab, and it's in the training mode now for Street Fighter 6. So super good awareness from the devs to put that in there. Here's your screen display settings. You can tweak everything you want to do there. This is a big one. Simple training settings. There's a gazillion training settings in training mode, and that's great for all the hardcore players and people really trying to lab. But they have simple scenarios to quickly test out, which is amazing to just give people who are new to the Street Fighter franchise something to do. Like, if you're a new player or a beginner and you're opening up training mode, you're already taking your first baby step to leveling up. It's amazing that they just gave this option to say, hey, look, like, we know we're overwhelming you with options here, but here's just simple training settings. You can immediately be thrown into drills to practice, and they use the real words, right? Combo practice, anti-air, whiff punish practice. Like, they don't hide this information from you. They guide you to it to help you understand what's going on in the fighting game sphere. So less hidden information from the player is always preferred. And yeah, it's just tons of options. I mean, we go back to training mode footage here. So one of the big things too in training mode is the frame data label here on the bottom. It's so good. It's so good. It just immediately shows you how much startup, active, and recovery frame something has, and it shows it for both you and your opponent. So you can just instantly know all the frame data for any move. You just press it. There's no guesswork anymore. It tells you if you're plus or minus right away. I'm so happy to see this in the game. It's so sick to see, because there was that whole discussion a while ago of like, oh, we shouldn't even include frame data information in the games. I'm so happy Capcom did not listen to FGC Twitter at all during that time. Basically, they say if you want the information, it is all there. If you don't want it, you can hide it. You don't have to look at it, but everything is there for you. Nothing is hidden. They stopped trying to hide this kind of information from the player, which is huge. And on top of that, there's also another really interesting example here. They also do this little neat thing where they show you a success and the input icon when you do a special move appropriately. So it also gives another little nudge for new players in the right direction to say, hey, yeah, you were trying to do that special move, right? This is like Jamie's DP. Like, you were trying to do this and you did it. Success, right? It just helps guide you. So if you do special moves in training mode, you'll see this pop up. I just think that's another nice little touch, just to, like, you know, let people know, hey, you're doing the right thing. Just providing more clarity and guidance for newer players to understand what's going on. So any special move you complete, it'll pop up with this, which I think is a really great quality of life feature. All right, so moving on to the main presentation of the game, right? So I'm just going to talk about just how the game looks and feels just from the moment you open it up. And I got to say, I loved it. The moment you open the game up, it hits you with that groove. It flashes the menus, hits you with the Street Fighter 6 logo with that punch heavy sound effect. It just hits you in the face the moment you open the game. I'm instantly pulled in the moment I open it, and I love the presentation of Street Fighter 6. So once you get past these screens and you get into all the menus and everything, you have the opening cutscene for Battle Hub. And then you just have the basic menus for the three main segments of the game. Battle Hub, World Tour, and Fighting Ground. World Tour will be the single player mode. Fighting Ground will essentially be all of the Street Fighter V style menus, like training mode, matchmaking, the non-social aspects of the fighting game, like offline gameplay versus training mode, and online matchmaking, right? So I actually really like the presentation here, the stylized menus, the music and everything. I feel like everything is great. I love the way Battle Hub looks. Like, when you actually get into Battle Hub, I think it looks amazing. All of the menus feel crisp. Battle Hub is goofy, but it has this, this nice charm to it. It reminds me a lot of Dead Rising, like running around the mall. Dead Rising 1, if you've ever played that. But I love the contrast between how sleek and clean the whole Battle Hub is and all the grotesque custom character creations that are running around here. So I just think the presentation is really good. The menus and UI is really intuitive. I feel like they did a really good job of having everything included in the menus. They also have tips to help guide you in case you don't know where to go in the menus and things like that. So I feel like there's a lot of really good user interface options here. And I really like the presentation of the menus, the opening cinematics, the opening menus, and the battle hub itself. Now, for in-game presentation, I do have some critiques. So when you're in a game, the UI for the actual gameplay, I don't love the in-game UI, like when you're actually in a match. I feel like the life bars and the meters feel kind of rigid. They don't feel that lively compared to the rest of the presentation. I mean, I like the text, the round 2 fight and all that, but I do feel like there could be something to spice up the life bars. Everything is just straight lines and it's very clean, but it feels kind of sterile compared to the rest of the game, in my opinion, especially with all the graffiti effects and everything that are going on in the gameplay. And the character portraits feel a little bit bland with the names just put there in plain text. So I'm not a huge fan of the in-game UI. It gets the job done and it's not distracting. So I can see that from a functional standpoint, it's pretty good. But I feel like there could be a little bit more personality in the UI elements itself in-game. That's one area where I feel like the presentation doesn't line up. It doesn't feel like the in-game UI and the menus outside of the actual gameplay correlate with each other that much. There's some correlation, but it doesn't really feel like the same level of quality and detail from the rest of the game, in my opinion. It clashes a little bit. That said, I also have some critiques for the graphics. Overall, the art style is very new, so it was a bit jarring to get into at first, having more realistic Street Fighter 6, and that was one of the main things that was kind of confusing me or concerning me when I first saw footage of Street Fighter 6. But that art style has grown on me for the most part after seeing it a lot more, so it doesn't really bother me anymore. However, there are still some rough spots with the animation. I feel like some moves animate gorgeously. It's like Jamie has a lot of fluidity in his animations and looks really sick. I mean, obviously the particle effects when you do DI and everything look great, but you know, the Tatsus, they still look funky. Ken doing Shoryuken sometimes feels very lifeless. The throw tech animation has a lot of stop and a lot of sudden like jankiness to the motion, like you kind of just teleport away from each other suddenly. So there's some rough spots I feel like in the animation fluidity that I'm not totally vibing with. It just feels out of place because some of the animations are so fluid and feel so impactful, but then others don't. So there's a consistency issue in my mind with the quality of the animations here. I think the overall graphics and art style are fine. They actually achieved more realistic Street Fighter, which is what I was mostly worried about. But yeah, some animations are not good. I gotta be real with you. I think overall it looks good, but I do hope that they can clean up some of the animation, because some of them are very weird looking, which I feel like was almost inevitable when going to more realistic Street Fighter. I mean, it's just part of the issue, taking a franchise that's been always kind of a cartoony animated style and making it with more realistic models. You kind of lose the ability to stretch the models dynamically as much. So I don't know. I hope they find a way to address that, but there are some rough edges that could definitely be cleaned up. Okay, now it's time to get into the real meat and potatoes. We'll talk about the gameplay a little bit. You know, it has to be included in the Street Fighter 6 beta impressions. So the gameplay overall, I think, is really interesting. So I'll go over it kind of category by category and then give you my overall impressions, right? So first thing, the simple place to start, the buttons, the normals. Normals in this game definitely have a lot more range than Street Fighter 5. It feels definitely more like Street Fighter 4 style of range of buttons. Your low forwards, your medium kicks, things of that nature definitely go a lot further than you would initially expect when being used to Street Fighter 5 style of range. They are generous with the hitboxes on these moves, but they're also generous with the hurt boxes and the recovery frames, right? So you have pretty good pokes. However, the pokes are definitely whiff punishable. So it's not going to be a situation where, like in Street Fighter 5, it felt like not many characters had great pokes, but those who did, you really struggled to whiff punish. Feels like every character, at least in the beta, all has at least a few really good pokes and ways to whiff punish other characters' good pokes. Obviously, characters like Chun-Li, I felt like had better pokes than others. There's still going to be difference in strength in that department, but everybody at least has something. Even like Kimberly, who is more of like an offense rushdown kind of character, still has like a pretty strong standing medium kick to poke with. So definitely a lot more range, very generous with the range in this regard. And special moves. So special moves, there's not really any just do it special moves for the most part. It feels like there's a lot of moves that they do intend for you to buffer in this game. So Jamie, for example, has low forward to Rekka. That is almost safe on block. Like the pushback on the Rekka makes it fairly safe. I believe it's -6 if I remember correctly, but most people's jabs aren't going to reach. So you can kind of get away with it in a lot of situations. The only like just do it move that Jamie had was EX Palm. And I know that in level 3 and beyond, it was at least -1 or level 4. I don't know if it was -1 in other levels as well, but you could definitely just throw out EX Palm. But I feel like even if those options exist, they're definitely balanced by the other mechanics in the game, because people could just be holding parry, they can just be doing drive impact. Like there's a lot of checks and balances for those types of moves. So for the most part, there's not really any like EX dash straight, EX tackle type of moves from Urien. The special moves don't help you bypass neutral as much, even though there are ways to do that for sure. They don't really come from the special moves as much, it seems. They're usually like combo extension or utility moves or combo enders for the most part. Combo structure. So the combo structure without any meter usage, I want to make a differentiation here, is pretty straightforward. It's often relying on jab chain confirms, right? So your jabs on hit don't combo into anything else besides chain jabs. So a lot of your combos will come from chain jab confirms into specials. You also can do mediums to jab links for most characters, but you can't really do medium to medium like Street Fighter V, and not really doing heavy to a button unless it's like a special unique normal, like say Ryu solar plexus, right? Forward heavy punch. You can link after that one, of course. But for the most part, it's not following too much of the Street Fighter V combo structure. A lot of the combo extensions come from different punish states and from using Drive Rush, so I'll get more into that in a bit. But without any meter, without any special circumstances, for the most part, your confirmable combos will come from jab links, right? So the frame data on block, the frame traps are definitely much more limited without resources, right? So for the most part, characters might have a +1 on block medium. Not all of them have it, but a lot of them do. But you're not going to have any like common medium to jab frame traps or jab to medium. That doesn't exist. Your jabs are going to be negative on block, actually. Like usually they're -1 or worse on block. The idea being that if you want to press more than one jab, you should either be doing a jab chain or using your drive meter to extend your pressure. And I'll get into that in a bit. So the frame data is definitely not oppressive. Generally, you kind of get your one offensive sequence, and if it doesn't work, you're kind of resetting it a little bit, like backing up to maybe approach in a different way or to whiff punish or something of that state, or you can spend resources to keep the pressure going. So it's not as canned of a sequence. Like you can't just memorize strings of normals to counter hit over and over and instead of spacing traps. You definitely get fewer hits on block without spending resources if you want to keep your turn. Your turns are definitely not as extended unless you burn meter to make them so. What this game really comes down to is all the modifiers and all the ways to extend your pressure and use meters. So the first thing I'm going to talk about before we get into the drive system, which is all important, is I want to talk a bit about the frame data modifiers, all right? So there's actually a lot of ways to modify your frame data in this game, which is very, very unique and very clever in my opinion, right? So counter hit is standard for Street Fighter. You get +2 frames of advantage on hit. Punish counter is the important state. Punish counter is when you actually punish a move on block or on whiff. So including whiff punishes, you get 4 more frames of advantage on hit. Drive rush enhanced normals, I'll get into that also more. You get 4 frames more advantage on hit. And when someone is in burnout from spending all the drive meter, you get 4 more frames of advantage on block. So the reason why the frame data is pretty, you don't have a lot of plus frames on hit or block in general, is because the game is trying to guide you towards using these 2 mechanics in order to extend your pressure or to get bigger combos. So for example, punish counter is 4 more frames of advantage on hit. So normally, like I said, you can't do jab to medium on a normal combo string. However, so you block an unsafe special move, a -4 special move, you do jab, it'll give you a punish counter, and then you can actually do a jab to medium combo. even though you can't do jab to medium normally as a block string because you're going to be negative on block. Actually, they can definitely easily parry, drive impact, whatever, challenge, press their own button right back. You need to do jab jab. On punishes, you can do jab to medium. That's not something that was available in Street Fighter V. If you punish a 4-frame move in Street Fighter V, you could do only your jab and whatever naturally links after, which might be nothing in Street Fighter V, right? So you actually unlock a lot of new combos on punishes. So you have different routes for punishes versus routes from your raw offensive pressure, which is really interesting. Also, drive rush enhanced normals, right? So if you drive rush and move in, it's not just hit, this is actually hit and block, excuse me. So if you drive rush and then press a button after the dash that moves you in, you actually have an enhanced version of that normal to get better block string. So if you want to do a tick throw, so imagine what I just said, jabs are negative on block. Jab to throw is actually very interruptible by the opponent's button. You can do drive rush into jab, which actually makes it a true tick throw. With that 4-frame advantage, you become +3 instead of -1. You can do an actual tick throw after drive rush, right? So it actually gives you more options. So you can see here how without spending resources, you actually don't get much block string pressure. But if you want to keep the pressure up, you can spend your meter with things like drive rush to keep that going. Burnout is the state where you actually you burned all your drive meter. You actually take a lot more frame disadvantage on block, right? If you're in burnout, everything the opponent does to you will do 4 more frames of block advantage, which drastically changes what's safe and unsafe and what's plus and not plus, right? With Jamie, when I do my Rekkas in level 4, if you're in burnout, my Rekkas become plus on block. They're usually -3. With 4 more frames of advantage, they're +1. So I can just do low forward to Rekka, jab to Rekka, jab to Rekka, jab to Rekka. I'm plus. And you don't have parry or drive impact to interrupt it. So burnout drastically changes the block string pressure. So we'll talk about this more, but don't be in burnout. It's actually really huge. So let's talk a little bit more about punish counter. So I think punish counter is really, to me, this is the most clever addition to Street Fighter 6, right? I think this one is huge. This is game changing, right? Any punish, including with punish, equals +4 frames advantage. So I mentioned this already earlier. You basically get new combo routes on all of your punishes. So this allows them to solve endless frame trap pressure, but keep strong punish combos. It's just so clever, right? Like if you counter hit somebody normally, you don't really get the same combos that you would get from a punish counter, and also the frame advantage on block is really bad. But this allows you to unlock these damaging combos, but only on a punish. So this enhances your punishes on blocked moves, but it also enhances whiff punishes, right? So things like spacing traps, right? If you do a sequence on block and someone tries to counter poke you or to take their turn back by pressing a button, you do low forward direct with the Jamie, they try to reach you with their jab and they whiff. I can then do my spacing trap into jab, it'll punish counter, and then I can do a medium confirm after. That was not possible in Street Fighter V, for example. If I spacing trap you and get a counter poke, I don't get this counter hit state, and I don't really get this extra time to confirm. But now I can counter poke you with a jab, confirm that with a medium kick, and then get a full combo from it. So spacing traps actually become much more dangerous because of this, right? Like you can force whiff punish situations and get huge reward from that, which you really couldn't do before. But it's not just that. There's also special states, right? If I whiff punish you with Jamie stand heavy kick or like block and punish a special move, like I block your DP and I do standing heavy kick, it causes a whole crumple. It's very similar to what a crush counter crumple would be in Street Fighter V. However, how you get it is very important. Crush counters in Street Fighter V were caused by preemptively pressing a move and coincidentally interacting with the opponent when they pressed a button. This is on whiff punish. If it hits you at the same time or while your move is starting up, you're going to get a counter hit, which is not going to cause the crumple state. You only get the punish counter if their move actually whiffs, and then you get the crumple, and that leads to a full combo. So they also allowed these sort of like big punish moments and big damage opportunities but they made it so that it's more earned because the way you get it is by whiff punishing. It's not earned by preemptively guessing with the button. I mean, you can kind of do that a little bit here and there, but it's not the same idea, right? If you interact at the same time, you just get a counter hit, but this big state doesn't happen. So punish counter really allows them to get creative about how you earn damage, and also allows it so that the damage earned is not so wild without baiting out people from whiffing moves in neutral. You get better damage by playing better neutral rather than by having better pressure. Big difference from Street Fighter V in my opinion. Very big difference. I think this punish state is very clever because it allows them to keep the frame data very, very tamed, but then pump up the plus frames when you get a whiff punish. I think that's a super clever system that they implemented in this game, and it really ties in with the rest of the mechanics. Let's get into the drive system. So you should know all the drive mechanics by now. There's drive reversal, overdrive for EX moves, drive parry, drive rush, drive impact. I think this is what makes Street Fighter 6 Street Fighter 6. I mean, I think punish counter is the most subtle, unique mechanic in the game. Drive system is in your face saying this is what Street Fighter 6 is. So it's definitely what makes the game unique. And once again, I feel like the whole philosophy is nothing is unearned in this game, right? So the drive system is what balances going ham in this game, right? The basic game without the drive system is kind of dry for the most part. It's very neutral based and it's solid, but it doesn't have the sauce. The drive system is the sauce on top of that. But just like, you know, you want to have the sauce, you don't want to be lost in the sauce. That is obviously, you know, an important factor to keep in mind. So what do I mean by that, right? So if you look here, how does it differ in a lot of ways from other mechanics? You start every round with full drive meter, right? You start with 6 bars, so you instantly have access to all your utility from the moment the round begins. From the moment the round begins, you have everything you want to do. The only thing you're lacking is your CA meter, which is like a one-time cash out sort of deal. It just builds up and it transfers between rounds. It doesn't deplete between rounds, and you don't start with it. You have to build it over time. But Drive Rush is like you already have the party starter tool. So what can you start the party with, right? So you use this to do things like Drive Rush, which is really, really cool to do because it lets you cancel from normals, right? So you can just buffer any normal and then immediately cancel and get in. So that's really cool, and you can get pressure and plus frames. So Drive Rush also, besides just canceling, enhances moves in unique waves. So we already talked about this, right? It gives you plus 4 frames on hit/block, so you get new block strings and new combos from it. But it also does unique things, like it modifies juggle properties, gives them extra juggle points. So for example, Jamie has a launcher move. If I do Drive Rush into my launcher, I get new combos from it in the air than I would have otherwise. So it doesn't only change the frame rate, it also changes the moves. But how do I actually get to use this, right? So if I cancel from normal equals 3 drive meter, but on the other hand, Drive Rush from parry equals 1 drive meter. So this is like what you would call maybe an empty Drive Rush, right? So if you really want to extend your pressure on block, it's very costly, but you can do it. You can keep your pressure going, Drive Rush in, set up more plus frames, and have more opportunity to pressure the opponent. But it takes half of your drive meter, which is extremely costly. Or if you just want to fish with pokes in neutral, and then you get a counter poke and you convert it to a combo, you can do that, but it's very costly, right? So you have the ability to go ham right from the beginning, but it will cost you because burnout is such a horrible state to be in that you are mindful of spending these resources without making it really count, right? Drive Rush from parry, however, this is 1 drive meter. This is cheap. And this can be really creatively used. We've seen in a lot of unique combos. There's a lot of ways for putting people into the air and then juggling them with Drive Rush from parry. So there's a lot of sauce to be found for the combo system from the empty Drive Rush. So we initially were only using Drive Rush from normals to extend combos, but actually we found that there's a lot of ways to juggle people with a lot of characters and keep the combo going by using empty Drive Rush. So this is where you're going to see a lot of creativity in your combo extensions come from this mechanic right here. You can also use it to just run up on somebody in neutral and get plus frames. You can even do things like empty drive rush full screen into overhead and get a combo after your overhead, or plus frames on block after your overhead. So that's pretty gnarly. However, it's still balanced because you can just jab on react. If you see that, if it's in neutral, you can actually check them with jab. And once again, you always have parry and drive impact to armor through things. So you have a lot of checks and balances to counter these kind of offensive approaches. So drive rush is really cool. It gives creative options for combos and pressure. It's really interesting and a really clever way to keep the execution and creative options alive in a limited system. Like without this drive rush system, your combo options would be pretty lacking. So I feel like this solves a lot of the issues with the Street Fighter V combo system. Street Fighter V combos are pretty cut and dry, except for like a few select characters. I feel like Minot, G, Oro, Rose, like the later season 5 characters like Dan, they had really unique combos that with a high skill ceiling that required experts to really kind of master them and to get the most out of them. But I feel like a lot of the earlier Street Fighter V characters had this problem where it was kind of hard to squeeze every last drop from the system. Like you really ran the well dry pretty early. And I feel like they got better about optimizing the mechanics within the system towards the end of Street Fighter V with later characters to keep the sauce going. But at Season 1 Street Fighter V, like the very beginning of Street Fighter V, it was pretty cut and dry. So they were really creative with this because the game still has an input buffer. Like I didn't mention that, but I feel like I should have already. There is still an input buffer in the game. It still has easy links and easy special move execution, just like Street Fighter V. So how do we avoid the combo system from being too linear and straightforward so that anyone can do any combo, but also don't make the frame data and the combat system super oppressive so that, you know, a beginner picks up the game and it's hitting you with max damage combos and all this pressure and you die if you get touched, right? This is their solution to it. They make all these frame data modifiers so that you only get the big frame data when it's a punish or a whiff punish or spending meter. The basic pressure without resources is very light. Then you can use things like the drive system, which requires meter awareness and situational awareness to extend your combos and find all the sauce you want. And you can burn it all right away. It's not like V-Trigger where you build it at the end. You can do it all right away and have as much as ham as you want. However, you'll go into Burnout. And Burnout you will probably lose, or maybe it was a smart gamble to bet all your resources and it'll give you the lead you need to win or close out the match, right? So they give you everything up front to do, and the only limitation is your decision making. And they also allow for complex combo options and creativity with the system without having really tight links, right? Street Fighter 4 had really intense combo systems, and it was gate kept by the link system, right? You could do so many crazy combos, but your execution had to be on point, and you had to have one frame links, and you had to grind for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and really master all the timings, and you probably drop it in a real match, right? So like I've said for a while, I feel like the Street Fighter one frame link is pretty much dead. That is not really coming back. One frame links are a dated concept, I think, in the eyes of developers, which I agree with to an extent, but I also like Street Fighter 4 one frame links. I like the combo system of Street Fighter 4. So Street Fighter 5 moved away from that to begin with, and I feel like they didn't really find the groove with that until like the later seasons, and with certain characters they figured out how to have interesting combo routes and have skill expression within characters by giving them unique mechanics, and they did that towards the end and with a handful of characters. Street Fighter 6 out of the gate solves this problem with universal mechanics and universal design principles. Every character has the ability to sauce it up in different ways based on the universal mechanics. All of them. I feel like this is a really good indication that at the very first draft, they've crafted something where all characters can have something that will make them unique, and players can differentiate themselves by enhancing their combos and juggles and understanding with this system. So Drive Rush is really creative in that regard, and we've already seen with 3 days in the beta people doing wild combos and extending them with the Drive Rush system. So I really feel like this is a very clever system to both have the easy options, basic combos, B&Bs be simple, but then have a really high skill ceiling and also allow you to do fun stuff, but you can't go too ham because there'll be consequences for it. But if you really want to, you can. So you can do whatever you want. There's just a consequence to your action. I think it's a really great system. That said, we got to get into the divisive one. Drive Impact. This one is big. Drive Impact, it's pretty much like an instant stop sign, right? This is the stop sign mechanic, right? So I mentioned you can go ham, but all you have to do is worry about burnout. There's another thing you got to worry about. It's Drive Impact. Drive Impact is what gives extra tension at all times to the neutral. You always have to be playing with awareness and be playing on your toes. Drive Impact is 100% reactable when looked for, right? Like, this is a very reactable move. However, obviously, it's there to stress your mental stack. So Drive Impact can absorb up to 3 hits, and then it's unblockable. If you're close to the corner, it will wall splash you and give you a full combo. But basically, it leads to a few things. It stops you from doing autopilot pressure. This is what punishes preemptive buffers. If you are just doing things like low forward to fireball, low forward to Rekka on block, and they're safe on block, if you're doing this like non-stop, Drive Impact is the call out to get you to stop doing that. If you're just like mashing away and doing a ton of strings and not looking out for Drive Impact, this is what stops you from doing that. Your counters to this: if you pressure with jabs and cancelable pokes, the moment you see Drive Impact happen and they absorb your move, you can just counter Drive Impact right back, right? And then when you get a counter Drive Impact, suddenly you get a ton of damage in return. So this also can be a call out for fireballs. Like, if you're just spamming fireballs, you can't always get a guaranteed punish on reaction to fireballs. You can predict them. It depends on the fireball timing, spacing, and the character, right? So there was definitely times where I reacted to a fireball and did Drive Impact, and then I got punished right after. But there's also times where I just preemptively did it and was able to punish. I think that the data needs to be ironed out on that, on what fireballs you can react to and at what spacings. That kind of lab work hasn't been done yet. But you can definitely predict fireballs and punish them. But yeah, if you're pressuring with jabs and they start armoring through your pressure, you can always just Drive Impact, right? If you do meaty throws on their wake up, it's going to throw their Drive Impact, right? So Drive Impact loses to throws, 3 hits or more, counter Drive Impact, invincible supers, and jumping over it. You can avoid it. But the strategy is to keep your pressure light. So if you're running around doing like full screen drive rush into overhead, for example, like I was a fan of doing that in the beta, if they just do wake up Drive Impact and I go, haha, I'm running full screen into my plus frame overhead that can get a combo on hit, Drive Impact is gonna smoke me. And who am I to say that's a scrubby thing to do? Well, is it not scrubby for me to just go for a full screen plus on block overhead? The stop sign for me, for going ham, is Drive Impact. So you can sneak in these offensive options when you want to, but you have to think like, hey, there's a chance they could Drive Impact. So Drive Impact gives this constant tension at all times. It's definitely reactable. This will be the month 1 grief mechanic. People will complain a lot about this, but I think honestly at high level play, it'll lead to like more timeouts or stalemates where people will just like very carefully poke around because no one wants to overcommit to anything. So I think if anything, it slows the game down. But this does get you out of certain situations. It does stop autopilot play, and it does add a lot of tension at all times. You always got to be ready. So it allows you to overload their mental stack because everything else is slower. Dashes are slower. Jump-ins are pretty good, actually. Jump-ins are fine. But dashes are definitely slower. So this just gets you to look for more things in neutral to increase the mental stack at all times. There's other elements of the drive system which I haven't talked too much about. Drive Parry. This is essentially a block button. Like, I don't think people have realized the power of this right now. This is essentially a block button with the chance to get a perfect parry. So if you just activate parry and hold it, if you don't get the perfect parry, you're essentially just blocking. What people didn't really understand is that the frame data when you parry, non-perfect parry something, it's the same as blocking it, right? So yeah, blocking will actually deplete your drive meter, which you obviously don't want to do because if you go into burnout, you're probably going to die. But so that's one reason to do it. but it's a block button that builds back your drive meter, avoids left-right mix-ups, and you had the chance to get a perfect parry from the moment when you pressed it. So yeah, there are possible situations for degenerate high-low left-right mix-ups with a drive rush, but you can avoid all that by just parrying. You hold parry, right? So the counter to it is throw. If they do like a reset or go for Oki and they throw you, it'll beat your parry. But you really can just hold parry to avoid any kind of degeneracy that results from all these other mechanics, right? If people have really cheeky drive impact or drive rush setups, just parry it. Just parry it. Yeah, the perfect parry window is pretty tight. It's 2 frames, so landing a perfect parry is pretty hard to do. But if you miss the perfect parry, there's not really a consequence because you just get a regular parry. Unless you're late. If you're late, you just get hit, right? But if you go for a perfect parry and you're too early, then you essentially just blocked it and built back drive meter. So the frame advantage is the same as a block button. It's really a block button with some flair to it. So I feel like that was pretty clever from Capcom as well. So yeah, this will be optimized a bit more to get people to stop doing certain strings. But the counter to it is throw. I think it's here to check the nuttiness that might result from drive rush, to be honest. There's also drive reversal. This is basically V reversal. I didn't use this at all. I don't really have a comment on it. It might be useful in the meta later on. I don't really have a comment on it. It's unsafe on block if blocked. Similar rules to V reversal though. So take that as you will. And then there's Overdrive, which is just EX moves. And this takes 2 drive meters. So basically they tied all of the mechanics of the drive meter that makes Street Fighter 6. And then you have to be really careful because burnout equals death. If you are in burnout, no longer can access any drive mechanics, move slower, take chip damage, take more plus frames. If drive impacted and hit wall, you get stunned. So you're just terrible. You don't have parry, you don't have drive rush, you don't have anything. You move slower, you take chip damage, you can die from chip. It's very easy to get bullied into the corner, and when you're in the corner, it's very hard to stop drive impact because you can't drive impact them in return. All you can do to avoid preemptive jump, react, throw. And even then, they can cancel it from normals to make that window tighter where you might not even be able to do anything at all. And once you block the normal, it's a guaranteed drive impact, and they get a stun combo. However, there is a balance to this. Post stun and you get all drive meter back and exit burnout. So there's actually like a mind game. If once you get them into the corner, you might not want to immediately go for drive impact for the stun, because it might be more worthwhile to keep them in burnout for longer and get more damage, chip damage, and then towards the end go for the stun. Because the moment you get to the stun, you do your combo, they actually have all their drive meter back, and that could be like the comeback moment for them instead. So you might want, there is a mind game with it. So even the stun mechanic is no longer cut and paste. Like there's a mind game with the stun as well. When do you want to cash it out? Do you want to cash it out? Maybe you just want to harass without going for stun. So there's like, I feel like the stun mechanic being moved to this state, there's a lot more layers until when you can actually be stunned. And I feel like that's pretty smart from the developers, because the stun is what I think caused a lot of grief for a lot of people in Street Fighter V. Stun allowed you to get 2 combos and then a throw, and essentially the follow-up combo will kill. The throw will stun, or the shimmy will stun, the follow-up combo will kill. So stun was like a huge comeback mechanic. Now stun is more like a reward for winning, or a punishment for going too ham. Either you were oppressing your opponent so much to drain their drive meter by forcing them to block a lot, or they went too ham, overextended, and they put themselves near burnout or in burnout, and then you can capitalize on their mistakes. So it's a lot more dynamic, the stun. But also exiting burnout, get all drive meter back, right? So if you survive burnout, you're rewarded with your drive meter, and you can continue to play the game. So you're back in it after that. It's very punishing, lasts a very long time, but there are ways to survive it. So I think that's a pretty good system. Like the burnout is also like the stop sign to say, hey, you can't go too ham on this. I know we have all this meter to go fun, but you need to think about your actions. So burnout, I think, is appropriately punishing for how degenerate you could potentially get by burning all your drive meter. So once again, you can do whatever you want, but there's consequences for your actions. Okay, this is getting long. Let's go to the overall gameplay impression. This might come back to haunt me later on, but I'm gonna say neutral heavy currently, right? The thing is, this is a cursed statement to make because every single Street Fighter game is the return to neutral in the beginning of the game. That's what everyone said about Street Fighter V. The Street Fighter V is going to be the game for OGs. It's return to neutral, and you guys all saw how that went down the road, right? However, I feel like we have more evidence for that this time based on all these universal mechanics. Because the frame data tells a story here about how they want it to be neutral heavy. We have the frame data out of the gate. We're not guessing at the frame data like we kind of were in season 1 of Street Fighter V, so we can come to these conclusions faster. And the mechanics all put a stop sign on the pressure, so that you can get pressure, but you have to burn a valuable resource to get it. You have counter mechanics to counter the pressure, and there's a consequence for using all your meter. So it feels like this game will be much more neutral heavy than Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V was very neutral heavy and is at a high level. I feel like this makes the game more neutral heavy at all levels. I think Street Fighter V, it's very hard to control the neutral until you become like a pretty good player of the game. So I think this makes it so that at every level of the game, it's neutral heavy. Street Fighter V, I think it was very easy to get knowledge checked by not knowing frame data of a certain character or not knowing about their mechanics or a matchup. I feel like out of the gate, this game feels neutral heavy even when you're newer to the game. So I think that was definitely a conscious design decision by the developers, and I think they achieved it. We could be wrong, right? There are still very offensive moments. You will get throw looped, for example. Like throw loop still exists, explosiveness still exists. However, I think it's all very balanced, right? The meter system, all of that really balances that explosive offense, and also balanced by drive impact and parry, right? You have other ways to counter it as well with the universal mechanics. So there's a lot of stop signs to say, hey, slow your roll, but you can potentially work around everything. Nothing is set in stone. It's all interactive. All right, less comeback heavy. So this, I could be wrong about this, but what it feels like to me is comebacks rely on level 3 super / CA. So level 3 supers are pretty powerful in this game. That uses the actual super meter, which is not tied to your drive meter. I feel like the level 3 super is the comeback mechanic because what it does is takes opponent's drive meter, builds yours. So when you hit someone with level 3, you actually deplete a pretty hefty chunk of the opponent's drive meter, but during that whole time, your drive meter is also building back. So if you're low on drive meter and you get it confirmed at level 3, you build back all of your drive meter, so you're in a good meter advantage situation, and you deplete their drive meter. So there's a chance that you can punish them and actually put them in burnout with your level 3. So I think this is a pretty good comeback mechanic because it does pretty beefy damage depending on the level 3 or CA. It also can put them in burnout, build back your meter, but it's tied to a resource that does not build up over time. You're probably only going to get one level 3 per game, even if the game goes to 3 rounds, right? Like you're not likely to build so much super meter that you're going to get multiple level 3s in a match. It's not like V Trigger where you're pretty much guaranteed to almost have the V meter every round, and it's always a factor in every round. It's not likely. It's only likely to come into play in the final round of a set. So it can happen, and otherwise comebacks can happen just from solid play, right? Just using mechanics and playing the game normally, that can happen as well. But it does feel like comebacks are less likely to happen with all these mechanics. But the level 3 feels like you're ace in the hole. Like that, if you find the one hit, you still have to earn the hit the same way you would even without the level 3. So you don't really get an extra mechanic to change the flow of the game that you wouldn't have otherwise. You just have the resource to cash out and potentially swing the tides in your favor. Another big change is it relies often on one hit confirms, like a crouching medium kick confirm into a special move knockdown, right? This feels like it's moving away from single hit confirms, right? Crouching medium kick into Tenku with Karen, crouching medium kick into DP with other characters. For the most part, there's not really Doesn't seem like any crouching medium kick confirms exist, right? It doesn't really feel like you can confirm your crouching medium kick into a knockdown. So that was what the neutral was like in Street Fighter V for the most part. You fish for a crouching medium kick, confirm it to a special cancel, and that's how you get the party started. To me, it doesn't feel like that. If you do crouching medium kick, you might have a safe unblock buffer that you can preemptively do, but that safe unblock buffer will get blown up by Drive Impact. If you cancel your normals to specials and Drive Impact absorbed it, your special will come out and you'll get destroyed. To counter that, you can do your cancelable move, but don't cancel to the special. If they Drive Impact, you can react Drive Impact back, right? So I don't think they really want you to have crouching medium kick confirms because they want you to play the mind game, like, are they going to DI or not? And I don't really mind this. This could be a consequence of input delay in the frame data. Maybe this will change over time, but it really seems like right now it's not going to be the same sort of neutral where people are walking in and out of range and trying to poke with one crouching medium kick and then confirm on hit to the special move into knockdown into Oki, right? So you can buffer, you can like whiff punish confirm, but to do like a raw confirm, like just like pure reaction confirm to hit or block, it doesn't seem to really be what the gameplay is leading you towards at all. It's going to be more about like actual whiff punishing than raw confirms. I think that's the main thing with the gameplay. But you know what? That's not even what's important. We're finally moving into the most important part of the Street Fighter 6 beta, which is the social features. The Street Fighter 6 beta was all about the battle hub, which is what Street Fighter 6 to me is all about. It starts you off. The first thing you do is go into one of the most in-depth character creation modes I've ever seen, and you can make the most disgusting Cronenberg, horrific body horror monster you possibly can, or do a regular self-insert, completely normal guy. Up to you. But you start off with self-expression right off the bat by creating your own avatar and getting into the battle hub. So right away, I thought the character creation was amazing. And of course, once you get into the battle hub, you're hanging out with the homies, doing shoryukens and spinning bird kicks all over the place, right? Street Fighter 6 is finally addressing the severe lack of social features in fighting games. And it's doing it in its own unique way. And I mean really unique, right? There was definitely a lot of interesting people I ran into in my time in the battle hub. Just some of the interactions I had while hanging out in the battle hub here. You never knew who you're going to run into or what they would have to offer while you're hanging around. So it was always really interesting to see what creatures people would come up with. Here's a little group effort that happened during my time streaming the game. So Street Fighter 6 is finally solving the social issue. There's a chat in the battle hub. You can actually sit there and talk to each other. You can go up to cabs and sit down and play each other. You can admire each other's avatar. It's like the metaverse if metaverse was actually good. It's really cool to see all the options in the battle hub. And I think this is the most important thing that Street Fighter 6 is addressing, because Street Fighter and fighting games in general were formed in the arcade, right? The arcade was the social game experience. It's where you went to hang out. You actually got to play each other in person, discuss techniques, form friendships, and actually learn about the people you're playing with. Since the transition to consoles, social features have not been a part of the fighting game experience at all. It went from being the most social genre to being the most antisocial, right? It was really, really, really lacking in every game, including Street Fighter V. To me, Street Fighter 6 feels like the first next generation fighting game. There's silly things to do here. You can hang out, you can chat, you can connect with people, sit down at an arcade cab, call next on whatever, throw a Hadouken at somebody. You can customize your avatar. There's actually a lot of things you can do in here as well. And it provides a silly, fun hangout and just a way to experience the world of Street Fighter with other people and form connections, right? So you even have things like the Game Center here. During the beta, I saw Final Fight on these arcade cabs. You can just boot up and play classic arcade games. They also had Street Fighter 2. There's even this cool phone menu here. You can take selfies, check on your status, see a map, and see everybody on your phone. Everyone's posing up on you. The shop has tons of options you can use with in-game currency to customize your avatar, so you're incentivized to play the game and unlock this currency and flex on your friends with the best fit. You also have tournaments. Within the first 15 minutes of booting up the beta, I played in a tournament. The tournament bugged out, and in the second round, both me and my opponent somehow both lost when we were 1-1 in the set. But the groundwork is there. I'm sure they'll work out the kinks, but they even have like the tournament brackets, the history, the past results. It's all right there in the game. So the main thing to take away from here is that they're addressing the social aspect of fighting games that has been sorely lacking for such a long time. I think this is the biggest win for Street Fighter in general, is that they have fun ways to enjoy the games. There's also like the extreme battle mode, where it's a goofy way to play Street Fighter and hang out. This is what we need to ease people into the game. You need to make it social. You need to make it fun. The more hoops you have to jump through to get connected with the greater FGC, the greater community, the less people you're going to capture when they make that platform jump, right? Street Fighter 5 sold like what, 5 million, 6 million copies? How many of those people are part of the FGC? How many of those people know about the high level aspect of games? How many of those people actually move beyond mashing buttons a few times and being like, this game's not for me, before really understanding what the engine has to offer and actually having fun with the game on a higher level, right? Not many. You lose so many of those people because they don't even understand what's going on, and there's nothing to connect them to people who can enhance that experience. This is addressing that. This is how you can connect with people. You can get into the chat and have a salty discussion, or you can, offer some tips. I saw people doing the chat here. I'm actually blocking it. Right, people down there chatting with each other. You can actually connect with people, learn about the game, and exchange ideas. And you're more likely to have people actually stick around, form friendships, and learn the games and become members of the FGC. This is what actually makes Street Fighter 6 so unique and really the next generation of fighting games, in my opinion. So overall, this is the best Street Fighter product of all time. I think it's not even close. It's not even a competition. The gameplay feels extremely refined for a first draft of a fighting game franchise. Compare Street Fighter 5 Season 1 to Street Fighter 6 Beta. It's not even a competition. I think Street Fighter 5 towards the end of its lifespan became a great game that I really enjoy playing, but there's no denying it released in piss poor shape. Street Fighter 6, based on this beta, is definitely not going to be doing that whatsoever. I'm expecting great things from the full release, and really I'm excited. Social features, I think, is the number one thing that Street Fighter needs to go to the next level, and this looks like a great game, not just for Street Fighter fans, but a great game, period. Fighting games have not been good products for far too long. The only developer that has made a good fighting game product in a long time is NRS. NRS makes great fighting game products, which is why they are the best-selling games. Mortal Kombat 11 was the best-selling game when it released. Game, not fighting game, because it has content for people to enjoy at all levels. Street Fighter 6 is finally addressing that, and they're finally releasing a good product. And that's all I had. This went on for an hour and a half. We'll see how AA handles the editing. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel. We are getting really close to 100k subs. I'll really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the support. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.